Welcome to C3 in This Together, 30 minutes in our own voice, a mental health and suicide awareness series. In honor of September being Suicide Awareness Month, we will be hearing from someone with a lived experience who's coping, managing, and navigating mental health and suicide. My hope is that together, we will be the generation that ends the silence, the shame, and the stigma of mental health and suicide. My friends, today I am so honored. Our guest is Kay Warren. Kay Warren is an author, international speaker, a Bible teacher. She's an advocate for those living with HIV and AIDS, and also an advocate for at-risk children. And for the context of what we're doing today, she is a global advocate for those who are dealing with mental illness. Let's just welcome and embrace this amazing woman. Pastor Kay Warren, we're so glad to have you with us today.
Oh, Dr. Cassell, thank you so much for this invitation. It's just a pleasure to be with you and your audience.
Thank you so much. Let me also say this personally. Let me express my personal appreciation to you and your husband, Pastor Rick Warren, for inspiring us all to hope and to live purpose-driven lives. So thank you so much again for all that you and your husband do. We're so honored to have you again. Well, let's jump right in talking about navigating mental health and suicide awareness. Tell us a little bit more about yourself if you'd like, and then we could get into our first question.
Sure. I'm a native Californian. People sometimes think California is the land of the fruits and the nuts. And I would just have to say, if so, I must be one of them because I'm proud to be a Californian. I love it. My dad was a pastor. I married a pastor. I have children in ministry. So it feels like for me, that's a life that I'm very comfortable with. 3 children, 5 grandchildren. I love what I do. I love the ability to talk to people who are struggling and give them hope, or at least be a part of their journey of hope. So I really appreciate this time with you today.
Well, thank you so much. And again, we appreciate all that you do to inspire us with hope, especially during these most difficult and dark days. Well, let's begin with our first question. Tell us your story surrounding suicide.
Well, my first exposure to suicide on a personal level was my next door neighbor left me her suicide note about 30 years ago and 35 years ago. And I had never known anyone who had taken their lives before and was completely unprepared, didn't realize that she was struggling. And she left me her note. I remember that whole day searching for her. It was before cell phones. Calling her office, her husband's office, people that I knew, leaving a note on her door, like, if you come home, please contact. I just remember being absolutely sick with worry for her. And then later that day, I got a call that she had attempted suicide and was probably going to die. And I remember standing by her bedside in the hospital. I was allowed to go in and just being overcome with grief and sorrow. 1, that she had been in so much sorrow and I didn't know it. And 2, that I was going to lose my dear friend. And then it began to move closer. My cousin's husband, a dear, dear man, began to struggle with depression and alcohol. And he was a pastor and he felt very alone. He didn't know where to go as a pastor with his struggles. And he ended up taking his life. And so it was just like moving closer. But the closest, of course, was when our son, Matthew, took his life about 5 years after my cousin's husband did. He had lived with pretty serious mental illness since he was 7 years old and had struggled with we did everything we knew, all the treatment that we think of, all the medication, special schooling, special adjunct therapies. We often say that we twisted ourselves into pretzels, trying to do anything we could think of that might possibly make a difference, because he, for the last probably 8 years of his life, he lived with chronic suicidality. And we just never knew. I call it living on the edge of hell, because we never knew, got up on a given day, would this be the day? And unfortunately, sadly, on April 5th, 2013, that day came after his 20-year battle with serious and deep, deep, unrelenting depression. And, it was the very worst day of my life. The day that we hoped and prayed would never come. It did. And I wasn't sure that I hit the ground when I got that news, and I wasn't sure I could ever get up off of the ground. It was the worst day of our lives. Nothing more personal. So suicide became excruciatingly personal for our family. You mentioned in my bio that, and I was an advocate for people living with HIV, and I spent 10 years as a global advocate for people living with HIV and AIDS. The day my son died, I knew that my advocacy was going to shift toward mental illness and suicide prevention. And that's where I've been for 8 years.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. I know you've shared it so many times in various forums, but thank you again for sharing your story and taking your story and helping others to navigate their own story. And my friends, those of you who are watching, we want to let you know, I think this is a great place to let people who are watching know that your story means the world and could be the hope that others might need. So whatever your story might be, please know that your story can become healing, can become medicine, can become hope, can become light and life to someone who's navigating a challenge in life. So thank you again, Pastor Kay, for that. What would you say, our next question, what would you say to someone or a loved one who has been impacted by suicide, maybe someone who's been a survivor or someone who may have suicidal ideation? So quite a big questions there, right? Three questions, three different demographics, so to speak. But what would you say again to someone who's been impacted by suicide, maybe a survivor, or someone who's possibly, as we are sharing together, they may be having thoughts of suicide? What would you share with them?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, for instance, I lost a really close friend about 6 weeks ago to suicide. Someone, a young man that I've befriended and have loved and cared for and walked along his journey. It's slightly removed from me, but I'm still impacted by his death. His death was crushing. His death broke my heart. And I would say any of you who have lost, a friend or someone a little bit more on the periphery of your life, know what to do with the layers of grief that come with suicide. I think suicide and murder bring a different kind of grief. Mm-hmm. I mean, all death is painful. If you lose someone to an accident or to an illness or, a miscarriage or however death comes, it's usually comes with pain. So, but death that has violence associated with it, I think just adds some layers. So if you've lost someone, on kind of the periphery of your life, don't feel badly that you don't know what to do with that. Go ahead and feel your feelings. Yes. and let yourself grieve. It's okay. It's actually very healthy to grieve. If you are a survivor, as I am, it's someone in your family, a close family member, a parent or a sibling or a child, I can only say I've lost both of my parents and Rick's brother. And so we've experienced the loss of family members, but there's been nothing like the death of my child. Wow. And I think most parents, I've talked to thousands of parents since my son died. And I feel like I can say this confidently, that there is no other loss that is as devastating as the loss of a child. And so if you have lost a child and you also lost that child to violence, I actually lost my child to gun violence. It was self-inflicted, but an unscrupulous person who knew he was vulnerable and wanted to take his life, sold it to him. So that participated in my son's death. And if you've lost a child, just know that your life will never be the same again. But I think the hope I would tell you is it can be good again.
Yes.
As I said, when I hit the ground at the news that my son died, and I wasn't sure that I could ever get up, I laid on that ground for hours. And I can say that I did get up off the ground, both literally and figuratively. Wow. And life is not the same, but life is good again. And so if you've lost someone to suicide, I want to just reassure you, as difficult, as painful, as hard as this work is, life can be good again. If you're somebody who's living with chronic suicidal thoughts, as my son did, I have nothing but empathy and compassion, because that is a burden and a weight I have not personally experienced. I've watched my experience it, yes, but I have not personally had to carry that weight, that sometimes that darkness on my shoulders and in my soul. And I want you to know that you are loved. You and your pain matters. Your story matters. Yes. We need you. We need you. Yes. The organization To Write Love for Arms, one of their suicide prevention campaigns a few years ago, their T-shirt said, "Tomorrow needs you." Yes. And I would just concur, tomorrow needs you. Our world, our future, the people closest to you need you in their lives. Even if you feel like a burden to them, and that maybe the world would be better off without you, your family would be better off without you, that is not true. We need you. We want you. And so I would just say, make sure you surround yourself with people who are incredibly supportive. Yes. That may be a therapist. It may be friends, family, other people who are also struggling with chronic suicidal thoughts, because they will understand in ways that my heart is full of compassion, but I haven't walked in those shoes. So other people who have walked, survivors of suicide loss attempts, people who have attempted to take their own lives and survived and have come back to say, no, I'm committed to life. Yeah. Those are people that you need to be around, and all the things that tether you and keep you here in life are critical to keep those things within your reach. Wow. And I would say to you, while I don't know what that feels like, my heart is with you, and we want you. We need you. Please stay.
Wow, thank you so much, Kay, for that. And let me just echo that, what you've just said, Pastor Kay. We want people to stay. And for those who might be watching, we want you to hear us, hear it from Pastor Kay, hear it through this series, hear it through me as a clinician. We want you to know that we see you, we hear you, we value you. We want you to stay. Your life matters. Your life has purpose. Your life has meaning. And I love what Kay just said, that this world needs you. We need your voice. We need your story. We even need your pain. And someone might say, well, what do you mean by we need your pain? Well, through your pain, purpose can come out of that. So again, we just want to echo that for someone who's watching. Again, we want you to stay. And, I like to say this in therapy. It's what I believe. It's what I practice, that if you believe that today is your worst day, then we're going to stand in agreement with you. That means that tomorrow will be a better day. And I want to say that again, someone who is watching and in deep despair, you might be saying, yes, this is the worst day of my life. My friends, we are standing with you. We are sitting with you in that dark place, but we're also letting you know that tomorrow will be a better day if today is your worst day. Kay, what do you want people to know for our next question? What do you want people to know about managing our mental health?
I've learned so much by listening to my son and hearing what he said to me through all those years, listening to the stories of hundreds, if not thousands, of other people since he's passed away, what they've told me. And I think a couple of things I was thinking of, because I knew you were gonna ask that, is first of all, there's no shame.
Yes.
There is any shame or guilt or even self-loathing that you might feel as somebody who carries the weight or lives with a mental illness, mental health challenges. There is no shame. There is no guilt. If my kidney doesn't work exactly as it's supposed to, there's no shame in taking care of my kidney. If my ankle gets broken, I need to have my ankle looked at. If your brain isn't working exactly the way that it's supposed to, there's no shame, there's no guilt. The brain is an organ in the body like any other organ, and it needs care, and it can be healed, and it can function more like it's supposed to with some help. So first of all, I just say there's no shame, there's no guilt. It's no big deal. All of us live with the challenges. Your challenge is this, my challenge is that.
Right.
And then secondly, I was thinking one of the things that has been so good for me to really understand is that we are whole beings. We are body, we are soul, we are spirit. Often in the medical community, the medicine is focused on the body,
right,
and what the body needs in the moment, and that's critically important. But we aren't just bodies. We are bodies, which is very important, but we are also we have a soul, we have a spirit, we have emotions, we have feelings, we have I could say we're material and immaterial. We're substance, and there's something you can't grab the soul, but yet it very much is real and alive. And to get care for yourself on every one of those levels. Sometimes when people get a diagnosis of a particular mental illness, they start thinking of it as just as a medical, and it is, but it's not just medical, because we are whole beings. Right. And I think that's a place where the faith community, I'm very embedded in a faith community, Christian faith for me. And so when I talk to those in churches, I say to them, listen, if you look at people in your congregation and you say, oh, that person has a mental illness, then it's easy as the clergy to say, oh, well, then that's a medical thing, and we should let the medical folks help them. And I said, I've learned through one of my mentors, Dr. John Swinton, what if we flip that on its head and say, well, this is a person who has a mental health challenge. Then suddenly the faith community needs to be all over it, because nobody cares for the personhood, the soul, the way that the faith community, and maybe, like I said, I come from a Christian faith community, but other faith communities as well care about the soul, the person. Yes. So to get care for your body, but to get care for your soul, and to care for your emotions. There may be some things that that you need to see a therapist that aren't even necessarily about mental health challenges. They're about what else has gone on in your life, and you need some help with your relationships or with your work or your career. So spiritually, emotionally, physically, therapeutically, all those areas we need help to manage our mental health. And then probably the last thing that I would say about that is we don't have any one test that identifies, okay, this test right here, this blood test, this is going to tell you whether you have bipolar disorder or it's borderline personality disorder. It's just not that precise. So there's so much about mental illness and mental health challenges that we don't know, but what we do know is that they're real, they're common, and they're treatable. So that's one of the reasons that it's hopeful. You're not weird if you have a mental health challenge. It's so common. It's so common. About 43 million Americans are going to have some kind of a mental health challenge next year. So you are far from alone or weird or strange. And they are real. It's not like this made up thing. You're not weak. You're not a baby. You're not, a whatever. You are a human being with a body that doesn't always work, a brain exactly right. So it's real, it's common. And the really good news is that so many mental health challenges, when they're addressed, particularly when they're addressed early on, treatable, can make such a difference so that it doesn't get to those places of where it's just out of control, dominating your life. And then the last thing, I said I would say the last thing. This really is the last thing. Is and I know you know so much more about this than I do, Dr. Cassell, but the whole idea of what happened to you, when you were growing up, the things that happened to you shape not only our physical health, but shape our emotional and behavioral health too. And so being aware that while we don't know is the reason you're struggling because there's something off balance in your brain or the chemical, we don't know all of that for sure,
right.
But we can identify some of the things that happened to you, the traumatic things that shaped and affected your life, and those can be addressed, and you can find help and good answers for some of those things.
Wow, thank you so much. And you said so much, and this is the work that I do, so I'm getting so excited, but we're going to move forward. But I just want to highlight just a few things that you said and just expound on it. It's exactly what you said, right? It's no different than a medical condition. Both need to be treated. And we want to highlight that for people. And I specifically wanted to make mention of our children. So often, we don't take time to hear the hearts of our children. But, we know as clinicians, and this, that early intervention for children, when there's early intervention, we see the rates of suicidality go down. We see the rates concerning our mental health. So we really want to encourage parents who are watching to listen into the hearts of your children, particularly during this time when they've faced so many things, right? A crisis can trigger trauma, and we want you to be sure that you're listening in to your children. And then I also want to highlight what you said for the faith community. As you're aware, Pastor K, that I'm embedded in the faith community. It's part of the work that I do in addition to the traditional work that I do. But for those who are watching from the faith community, please hear the heart of Pastor K. Warren. She speaks to both faith community and traditional communities, but please take that to heart, that we want to be making sure that we're listening to those in our congregations, whatever your faith might be, whether it's, a church, a mosque, a synagogue, whatever that might be. Please be reminded that we are a tripartite being, meaning body, soul, and spirit. As we begin to wrap up, what do you want people to know about suicide awareness? Okay.
Yeah, I think people are afraid to talk about suicide. It's probably one of the last taboos in our society. It is gaining more press, more airtime, if you will. Almost, I don't know if I'd say it's too much. It's such an interesting thing because even in the 8 years that I've been a suicide loss survivor, I've watched the culture in our country change from it absolutely being, like you just don't talk about it, or people die by suicide, they're selfish. There's a lot of stigma and judgment. And then I've watched kind of that pendulum swing a little bit with some of the high profile celebrities who have died by suicide. Some, TV shows, different things that have put in a focus on suicide, so that now I have teenage grandchildren, and they talk about suicide pretty frequently, not always in the most healthy way. It's like the pendulum swung from silence to, I'll just kill myself today. But using it as a casual reference rather than even serious. So it's interesting how we've moved from that place of silence and total stigma to it can be a casual reference. But the good thing is that the more we talk about something, the more demystified it can become. That's the more people can hopefully know the signs to look for. it's so sad when people say about a loved one or a friend or a colleague or coworker, I had no idea, that he was struggling or she was struggling, and as though there are no signs. And from what I've seen and learned, frequently there are signs if we know what they are. And so about suicide awareness, I think it's critical that people know the signs. They're pretty simple. They're not overly complicated. You don't have to be a medical professional or mental health professional to be able to maybe spot signs of trouble in someone that you care about. And then it's like, well, then what do I do? Right. And people get scared of, well, then what do I do? Well, go ahead and ask some of those questions. Point out to your teenager or to your husband or your wife or your coworker, your friend, hey, I've noticed that even right there, you've done something sweet. You've said, I've noticed, which means I'm paying attention to you. So I've noticed that you don't seem like yourself right now. And you could feel that in you. It seems like you get angry really quickly, or you're in your room all the time, or that you don't want to play that sport that you've loved. Or I just noticed you're not yourself. Are you okay? And then asking when somebody, if you really sense or get an answer that they're not doing well, to be willing to ask the question and use the word, have you thought of suicide? Have you thought of taking your life? And not be afraid to ask, not be afraid to say the word suicide. And then if somebody says yes, then you can move in more closely in offering support, making sure that they get, if they do need medical attention, or they may just need, to know, just knowing that you care about them may be such a balm for their soul that they're able to get through the dark time. And so I think that there's some simple things, some simple ways that all of us could be more attuned to the signs of someone is actually feeling suicidal. I think that parents, particularly, I think sometimes as parents, we can look at our kids and go, oh, you're just being a drama king. You're just being a drama queen. Or they'll say it about their kid, oh, they're just a drama queen, a drama king. And what we as parents forget that what our kids' problems, or we'll say things like, you think you're having problems now, you just wait till you're my age and all the stuff you got to deal with when you're my age. And when we minimize our kids' pain and suffering, to them, it is the biggest thing they have ever experienced, because it is. It is. They've only lived 15 years. This is the biggest struggle they've had. And to them, it's gargantuan. And so to pay attention, to honor that, to lean in, you've said it several times already, to hear their stories and to let people know that they matter, that our kids matter. And if some of those things go on for more than a couple of weeks, get help. Don't wait. Don't wait for them to grow out of it. Don't wait for it to just be a phase, because what we're learning, particularly for, I'd say, teenagers, is they tend to be more impulsive than adults. And that trait of being impulsive can be lethal for a kid who yesterday was pretty much okay. Today, he or she wasn't, and that little bit of impulsivity can make all the difference. So stay close to people, be kind to each other, listen, lean in, don't let things go, know the signs, and let the people who are around you in your life know how much you care for them.
Wow, thank you so much. And again, just want to echo that. You mentioned it. So often people will say, well, I didn't see the signs. Well, we know this, between 80% and 90% of people who've taken their life by suicide, they said something a week or two leading up to that experience, right? So we want people to know that. The other thing, I like to say, and just to share with people is, we've learned this, Pastor K, and you've been on this journey as well, that we've moved from a sad, shock, traumatic approach to suicide awareness. In the past, it would be a sad, shock, traumatic approach. And someone will say, well, it is sad, it is traumatic, and certainly it is. But we've learned that does not help when we take a sad, shock, traumatic approach. The approach that we echo and we are encouraging people is to take a strength-based, a hope focus, and a resiliency approach, right? We want people to know that you are resilient. You've got bounce back and that you will make this. The other thing, and I'm smiling because when I do suicide awareness training, I always throw this in there, and I want to see your face when I say this, is this is the thought that I have surrounding mental health awareness. We need to treat mental health the way that we treat roaches. So hopeful moment. I was waiting for that. When I train police officers and clinicians, I always get that response. But what do you mean by that, Morais? What do you mean by that, Dr. Cassell? Well, roaches function in the dark. The moment that we turn on the lights, what begins to happen? They begin to scatter, right? So that's what we're doing today. And we want to encourage you with suicide awareness. Please be that listening place. Please be that safe place. And what we're doing through this series is we are turning on the lights so those things can be scattered surrounding mental health and suicide awareness. Well, our time has been so rich and so well spent. As we begin to wrap up, I do want to ask you, Pastor K, how can people reach out to you and tell us a little bit more about your organization focused on mental health?
Sure. My email is pretty simple. It's k@kwarencom. And I'm a little slow at it, but I do my best to answer email. So please feel free. If there was something that I said or something, a story or something you want to share, please feel free. My website is kwarencom. And my team and I created it because when I was a mom with a child who had serious mental illness, I didn't know where to go. I had never heard of NAMI. I had never National Alliance on Mental Illness. I had never heard of I just didn't know where to go. I felt very alone. And so we tried to create a website so that there was like a one-stop shop as a preliminary place to go to get reliable information on mental illness, on suicide, on grief. And so we've compiled, curated links to other sites. I don't create all the content, but I can link you to, and you need help on this. There are PDFs created that I access and put on my site. It's not a selling thing. I'm not trying to sell anybody. It's all free information, but it's all been vetted. It's all taken from the main mental health resources in our country. But instead of having to go to 15 of them, you can go there, find several, and then they'll send you in the right direction.
Wow. Thank you so much for all that you do. And again, we can't say enough how much we appreciate you. Your story is bringing life to so many people. Thank you. And my friends, as we begin to wrap up, we do also want to remind you and let you know, if you or anyone might be in crisis, as Kay mentioned earlier, please talk to someone. And one of the resources we want to highlight, of course, you heard the site from Kay and her work there. Also, we're going to mention to you her other site, which is Hope for Mental Health. That's been a wealth of resources to me personally. So we'll direct you to that. That will come up on the screen. But also, again, if you or anyone may be in crisis, we want to encourage you to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. That's a national lifeline. We do want to encourage you again to contact them. Also, for more resources about mental health, I personally invite you to our website, c3inthistogether.com, where again, you'll find a wealth of resources surrounding mental health and mental health awareness. And then also want to remind you again to take our 21-day Thankfulness Challenge. Yes, as well as our NextGen Hope Challenges as well. So my friends, thank you for being a part of this series. Oh, also want to remind you about our Hope Pill. The Hope Pill, many of you have been reaching out, asking about the Hope Pill. Well, that's available on our site as well. It's a daily reminder to take your medicine of hope. My friends, again, thank you for being a part of this series. Pastor K. Warren, thank you. Thank you again. We honor you. We honor your husband. Thank you for the work that you do. And we appreciate you taking the time. I'm telling you, I'm overjoyed that you took the time.
It's been my pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much. You don't know, we shared offline what you've meant to me personally, but to so many people, you and your husband, Pastor Rick Warren of the Saddleback Church in California. Thank you again, my friends. Thank you for joining us for this series. We appreciate you, and we will see you next time as our series continues, C3 in this together, a mental health and suicide awareness series. Many blessings to you, Pastor Kay, and to all of you listening. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next time.